keynote speaker for the luncheon period. Deputy Assistant Secretary Bill Fitzgerald is going to be speaking to us. He comes, I think, on the heels of just a wonderful opening keynote speaker in the person of Senator Cardin, who I think gave us a very, very interesting challenge in terms of setting the agenda, where we want to be 10 years from now in AGOA. And I think Bill will be able to pick right up on that. He is the Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Africa, working with Johnny Carson very closely. He covers West Africa, but he's also the deputy who handles all the economic affairs for the continent. So he is the one who does AGOA amongst many, many other things. He's got a very broad portfolio, so he's not just worrying about elections in Nigeria, which are worrying him a lot, but also many other things. He is a career Foreign Service officer. I won't go through his entire bio because you have that before you. But just to let you know that he has served in a number of posts on the continent and been in the Bureau as Deputy Assistant Secretary just for the last year, coming out of PRM, where he was for 3 years. His last posting in Africa was in Uganda, 2003 to 2006, I think it was. So with no further ado, let me introduce Secretary Fitzgerald. He will speak for maybe 20 minutes and then take questions and answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to speak with you this afternoon. It's a really impressive group, and I'm probably going to speak for about 15 or 20 minutes, but I insist that it be interactive, or else you and I are both going to fall asleep after this delicious lunch. And I don't have anything terribly provocative to say, but I do believe very strongly, before I start out, I do believe very strongly in the links between the political and the economic. And I'd be happy to explore that with you as well. But thank you very much, Steve, and Mike Van Dusen isn't able to be here, but I really appreciate the opportunity to come here to speak with you. I want to thank all the sponsors, the Wilson Center, the U.S. Civil Society Coalition for African Trade and Investment, Manchester Trade Limited, and the Shell Corporation. I don't know if Angolan Ambassador, Madame Diakite, are you around? Oh, that's too bad. And Charge Nayak from Mauritius, I'm not sure if she is here either. And that's too bad, too. In any case, AGOA is a topic that I'm sure you're aware of. We've been thinking about a lot these past few days at the State Department and at USTR and at the Department of Commerce and at Treasury. And we're gearing up for the forum next week. AGOA is one of the linchpins for our economic growth and development policy because of its potential to stimulate African commercial and business activity through trade and investment. It is especially gratifying to be here with you today because, after all, without the strong effort of civil society organizations beginning more than 10 years ago, AGOA, I firmly believe, would never have come into existence. And I'm looking at Greg Simpkins when I say this for all of his work on AGOA. Thank you, Greg. This is a particularly important year for AGOA, not just because it's the initiative's 10th anniversary, but also because there is now, and I'll think you'll agree with me, a growing consensus that AGOA is at risk of becoming obsolete. We need to find ways to revitalize the program and adapt it to the rapidly changing global economy. To be fair, and I know many of you know these stories, anecdotes already, to be fair, AGOA has had success stories. A friend of mine went over to a BMW dealership way out in Chantilly, and he sat in a car. And the salesman came up to him and said, "You know that car? That was assembled in South Africa." There are a number of models of BMWs and Mercedes that are assembled in South Africa and shipped to the United States for sale. Lesotho, which 10 years ago had no manufacturing base whatsoever, became the leading African apparel exporter to the United States. Kenya has emerged as one of the leading exporters of cut flowers to the United States. Ethiopia is now the leading exporter of millet to the United States. But even beyond that, their leather goods are used in golf clubs and golf shoes that are valued on the professional tour. Unfortunately, these examples, as laudable as they are, have not been enough to make as significant an impact on African trade and investment, as well as economic growth, as we all would have liked. Africa, and these are really troubling statistics, Africa still accounts for only 1.5% of global trade. Its intra-regional trade is only 10% of GDP, the lowest in the world. And last year, Africa's share of global GDP was only about 1.6%. I think we're all pretty familiar with the problems confronting Africa. And frankly, most of those problems have little to do with AGOA per se, but nevertheless, low productivity, chronic corruption, poor infrastructure, bad business climate, and internal trade barriers, they continue to rear their ugly heads. Topographers and geographers will also tell us that Africa generally lacks navigable rivers, like our Mississippi River, and that Africa's relatively smooth coastline has few bays and harbors for natural ports such as Singapore. All of these factors, natural and man-made, conspire to inhibit trade and investment on the continent. Furthermore, although exaggerated in the media, Africa's reputation for political instability, insecurity, and conflict is a common source of concern in corporate boardrooms across the United States. The choice is frequently for them between Africa and Southeast Asia, or South Central Asia, Eastern Europe. In any given year, political crises such as those that have recently occurred in Guinea, Kenya, Madagascar, Niger, and Zimbabwe are sufficiently commonplace to reinforce this negative image. I have to tell you a personal story. I met with a fellow who was involved with a large multinational corporation earlier this week, and they very much want to set up an aluminum refinery in West Africa, but the risk, they say, this is an $800 million to $1 billion capital investment. The risk is just too great. So they continue to carry out their assessments, their risk assessments, and they wait. But the potential for $1 billion and the number of jobs it would provide to this West African country is staggering. Rampant kidnapping and militant activity in southern Nigeria, although to be sure much reduced this year, still makes serious new investment in that region almost unthinkable. And of course, violent Somalia continues to be the world's quintessential failed state. Still, all of these problems do not preclude the United States from recognizing Africa's strategic importance and long-term economic potential. The United States and the international community need stable and democratic partners throughout the world to deal effectively with the challenges we all face today. Such partners are also needed for expanding opportunities for trade and investment, and thereby assuring continued global economic integration and growth. It continues to be paramount. It is in our national interest to collaborate with our African partners to overcome the obstacles to business and investment and making Africa's economies more competitive globally. It is in this spirit that we took a very hard look at what we wanted to do with this year's forum. And this is the exciting part, decided to hold part of it outside of Washington. We're going to Kansas City, America's heartland, to focus on agribusiness. We intend to generate new ideas and facilitate deeper links between the African and U.S. commercial sectors. Washington, the plenary is a very important forum on Monday and Tuesday, where chief policymakers from our side, from the American side, and chief policymakers from the African side come together to discuss, ideally, and very frankly, the problems that exist, the structural impediments that need to be changed for African exports to grow. But I believe that this first attempt to get outside of Washington, basically a government town, if you will, to go to Kansas City is to allow the investors from Africa to deal directly with the investors in Middle America. In Kansas City is absolutely essential if we're going to be able to kickstart and ramp up our efforts with AGOA. We all know the statistics that a large number of that much of AGOA is focused on the extractive industries, that 90% is made up of oil and other minerals that come to the United States. We've got to focus on other areas. There's no question about it. In Kansas City, we're going to be focusing on the agribusiness sector, where we've already attracted more than 100 African business people to go to Kansas City, and an equal number of American business people are also going to be there to meet with the Africans. The idea is to put them together. I'm sorry I offend people in the Africa Bureau, the State Department, because I basically want to say government needs to we're going to put you together, and government needs to take a step back. And that's the way it works. Government has a place, there's no question about it. But we shouldn't be getting in the way of investor-to-investor contact. Another innovation this year, and I know you're aware of it, and I believe they're coming over tomorrow to participate in some of your sessions, is the 35 African women entrepreneurs who are, everyone I talk to who's spoken to them says they're rock stars. They're incredibly vibrant. They're incredibly successful, even with the governments, again, 35 different countries. At their icebreaker on Sunday night when they arrived in town, it took about 5 minutes, and then they started doing deals with one another. And they're very outspoken too, which is absolutely wonderful. They're here for 2 weeks, but it's absolutely essential that we better integrate women into the world economy, and this is just the right way to do it. There will also be a plenary session on African women and global economy on Tuesday. I'm happy to say that these women will also be traveling with us to Kansas City. As I stated in the opening, we in government and private business, and industry too, owe a huge debt to civil society, which was not only instrumental in enacting AGOA a decade ago, it remains a key partner today. Hardly a day goes by when we're not in consultation with someone in civil society, think tank, Manchester, the Whitaker Group, National Bureau of Economic Research, that sort of thing. Indeed, it was our initial consultations with civil society that helped convince us to go to Kansas City, to try and break the mold a little bit and try and foster what we think needs to be fostered to jumpstart AGOA. I am looking forward to, as we move forward with AGOA, maintaining and strengthening our relationship with civil society, and we're always looking for ways to enhance it. We know that diaspora groups are a source of knowledge, know-how, and capital for trade and investment, and the Africa Bureau has made a concerted effort to reach out to such groups. I personally reached out to the Guinean diaspora. Others have reached out to the Liberian diaspora. I think I'm going to stop here because I don't want to lecture you, and I have a feeling I'm preaching to the choir, that we all think that AGOA is an important thing, that we all know that for the true economic development that we're all seeking for Africa, that we need to have stronger trade ties and stronger ties with civil society to make it all work. I'm going to stop there, but I'd open to questions. And one thing before Steve comes up, sorry to get you up again, Steve, by the way, is that, again, the linkage for me, there's a distinct link between the political and the economic in Africa, as it is everywhere. But I'm happy to answer questions about AGOA, about the U.S. government's position on it, as well as any political questions you might have. Thank you. No, I'm not going.
No, Bill will stay at the microphone to make this interactive. I just want to intervene to say we are on webcast here too. We will have microphones, so when Bill recognizes your hand, please wait just a moment for the microphone to get to you and introduce yourselves.
Okay. Sir.
Steve Landy, Manchester Trade. Very pleased to have you here. A lot of great ideas are being discussed at the Civil Forum, and
Great.
Hopefully they will get their way into your consideration.
They will on August 3rd.
Even more important, key question. Based on having attended, I think Tony and I have attended every forum until now, what we find is not the forum is always great, but the absence of a follow-up. And we know that last year the Africans discussed or suggested some type of a forum, perhaps led even by the ambassadors here that work together. So it's only a recommendation.
Oh, no, I read your paper.
Well, I don't say it. Okay, well, anyway, but I would say forget everything in the paper. If you get us a follow-up, it's great. So I just wanted to highlight that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you very much. No, a very good idea. What I don't want to have, though, is to get back together every 6 months to have a bunch of talking heads talk at one another. Yes, I see. No, it won't happen. Please.
Thank you, Paulette Lee, communications consultant. I'm trying to understand the root of if AGOA has not performed up to expectations. Why would the USG want to continue with it?
Well, I don't know if it hasn't performed up to its potential. In fact, we have seen tremendous increases in trade with the United States because of AGOA. I think the frustration is that so much of it is given over to commodities, be it oil, be it bauxite, be it iron ore, be it all those things. And I think really what we're looking for is the next level up, which is for the Africans to be providing the value added. You know, in other words, for instance, I just heard recently one of the sort of structural impediments. In Nigeria, they're producing this wonderful shea butter, but they ship it to the United States in plastic bags. In big plastic bags. And of course it comes here and then it's taken out of the plastic bags and put in these cute little dainty little screw top jars. And what's the problem? Well, the problem is Nigeria won't let those cute little glass jars into the country, or if they do, it's 100% duty on them. It's not economically feasible. So really, that's the sort of nitty-gritty. I agree with you, it's down in the weeds, but for God's sakes, Nigeria, wake up. I mean, this is the sort of thing where that's the value added. That's the value added. My last post, as Steve mentioned, was in Uganda, and I can't tell, it was 3 years of listening to Yoweri Museveni say, I want value added, stop buying our commodities. Well, not stop buying our commodities, but I want value added. You guys have been getting away with murder. Please. Yeah, on the right, in the back.
Good morning. I'm Lois Tat, founder and creator of Minority and Women-Owned Business, of which our mission is accountability, empowerment, and clarity.
Excellent.
If one is not accountable, he doesn't deserve to be empowered. And that's the problem over and over again I see. I also had the occasion to work with one of the creators of the AGOA. It was mainly for Africa, no other country but Africa. But as you see, it's watered down. And I think one of the main things that is going to hurt AGOA and any other trade with country, is not unclarity. You don't investigate these businesses. They've got no credentials. They get money, and the same thing goes over and over again. I feed my family.
Yes.
And my friends and family. And that is the corruption. It seems to be no stopgap measures by a third party that's not involved in this to get what is needed to the most of the people. That is the least of these.
Yes, ma'am.
And we
agree.
want to see more of that. And I hate to see my tax dollars. I've lost 40,000 plus in Africa myself.
Yeah.
And I have friends that say they've lost more than that.
Yes.
We need a conference on that angle
Absolutely.
to keep those people out who are the crooks and not let the people get in who are selling it short.
I'll be honest with you. Ma'am, I agree with you 100%. We did have, and we will have with Nigeria in particular, we have a new binational commission, and our first working group is on governance and that involves anti-corruption as well. And we met with the head of the Anti-Corruption Commission, and we said, you know, you're not doing enough. I mean, it's obvious to everyone out there who's crooked. You look at now, Governor James Ibori was put on trial in Nigeria for corruption, estimated fortune of $800 million. He was taken to trial, but he wasn't convicted. He walked. And it wasn't until he got to Dubai, unfortunately for him, that he got off the plane and there was a warrant from the Metropolitan Police in the UK where I'm going to add that his sister and his personal assistant were recently convicted of money laundering and other assorted charges. I agree with you 100%. I think the Africans realize that they've got to, and there are many Africans here agree with me or not, that it's time to change. That if you want foreign investment to come in, it's got to change. People are looking, as I mentioned in my remarks, people are looking in corporate America, they're looking at Southeast Asia, they're looking at Cambodia, they're looking at Bangladesh. And Greg, correct me if I'm wrong, there's a general feeling up on the Hill, and this is very, very important for AGOA. There's a general feeling on the Hill to provide these benefits that go to African countries to all least developed countries around the world. And, you know, it's a wake-up call. You know, it's one thing to produce apparel like Lesotho has done magnificently. It's another thing to compete with the Bangladeshis to produce apparel. Please, ma'am.
Yes. First of all, my name is Bernadette Paolo, and I'm the president of the Africa Society. And as a former Hill person, I want to say to hear a Department of State person be so candid is great.
But don't worry, I'm going to get fired tomorrow.
I hope not.
Or I'm going to get posted to
No, I think that everything that you said was correct, and I just want to ask you a question after saying something very briefly.
Yeah.
We're looking at the Africans and what they're not doing right, and we're discussing that, but I want to, for a moment, look at the United States.
Absolutely.
You know, the Chinese, you didn't mention the Chinese, and everyone mentions it. There are countries that have become adroit at doing business in Africa, and they're making money. And when you consider that Africa sits on 5/8 of the mineral resources of the world,
Bingo.
We have to learn how to navigate that terrain. And so,
Absolutely.
as one who's been a part of, like Greg and others in this room, AGOA 1, 2, 3, 4 with Rosa and everyone else. It's if we go up to the Hill and we, after this, understand clearly what provisions are going to be needed in legislation to strengthen AGOA.
Yeah.
We have to know, we have to have two things. First of all, a very definitive trade policy that everyone understands vis-a-vis Africa. And the second thing, we have to have the support that we need from our government, all branches of our government. So because, you know, what happens is the blame is conveniently laid in Congress. Yeah. But Congress has really been at the forefront of developing this AGOA from the very beginning. Yeah. So my question is, number one, how are we going to do that? And number two, do we have the political will at this time, given our own economy, to put in place what we need to do?
Okay. Yeah, excellent questions, really tough questions. I'll take the second one first. As far as the political will, the one of the goals about Kansas City is not only to encourage African imports to the United States, but in keeping with President Obama's export initiative, is to sell John Deere tractors, to sell Pioneer seed, Monsanto seed, to sell these things to the Africans. So it's a two-way street. Trade is always a two-way street. As far as a national trade policy, you've got me there. You've got me there. Well, no, you did. I could tell when you stood up. What I can tell you is that we do have a trade policy for Africa, and AGOA is a big part of it. But we've got to change AGOA. You know, I heard the same thing when we were up there briefing the Hill. Pearl Alice Marsh said, just tell us what we need to do to improve it. And I don't know what it is. I'm not sure if it's, you know, tax breaks for those who invest. I think that's a possibility. Why don't we explore that? But at the rate we're going now, and with the feeling that's on the Hill now to give these tax breaks, these GSB breaks to all the least developed countries, that's going to be hard. That's really going to be a big blow to the African economy, and I think that's a mistake. But understand your point. I take your point, and we will work on it. Please, all the way in the back.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I just want to thank our Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, for empowering and putting business into women. I think what I can say when you go back to her, let's put more women in Africa in business more than men. I think Africa can grow better, and let America do business with the women, though America is emphasizing on ACOA. As you say, ACOA may be going on, and it has really helped to create jobs. But here, the message doesn't get, all that we have listened today in the morning does not get to the common man. So tell her thank you, and we want the money, and we African women to be empowered, and Africa will grow. Thank you so much. And involve us in what, like the women of Africa have come here. We don't know. I'm a small woman-owned business here in the district. I need to know what is happening in Africa. I need to be part of Africa.
You're going to talk to them tomorrow. They'll be at your session tomorrow. And believe me,
so thank you so much.
No, thank you. And as far as telling Hillary Clinton, the next time I have coffee with her in about
I've met her many times.
I'm joking. I will pass the message along. My boss, Johnny Carson, does in fact talk to the
I talked to her many
Secretary.
times, and Ambassador Vivian Vera for the women empowerment. So I really appreciate them. But let's emphasize on African women on ACOA.
Agreed. Thank you. We share the same feeling. Actually, African women could very well be the real driving force in Africa. Please, sir.
Greetings to all. I'm Femi Akibi. My question, simply, I heard all along the issue of the continent is lack of infrastructure. Mm-hmm. The Chinese have got a system. They go to Africa, they exchange mineral resource for infrastructural development.
Very true.
The U.S. government is telling us we're a member of the IFC or FIFI. I'm not getting that quite right. My question, if the U.S. is watching China beating them down, us down on this issue, how come the U.S. haven't come up with a different approach to give infrastructural development to the continent?
I think we have come up with a different approach. It's called the Millennium Challenge Corporation. And I think if you look at the 11 or 12 compacts, again, we insist upon, and granted perhaps let's just say other countries don't insist on human rights or good governance or treating the people fairly or giving them good wages and respecting labor unions and that sort of thing. That's one thing. But the Millennium Challenge Corporation, if you look at each one of these compacts, the one that was most recently signed for Senegal, it's infrastructure. It's a north-south road, and it's a road in and out of the Casamance area where, frankly, there are a number of women entrepreneurs growing everything from cashews to other items. We are providing infrastructure support. The compact for Senegal was $540 million. That's not chump change. I would also add to that, however, that there has been a lot of hype in the media, and I'd be the first to admit that the Chinese, and, frankly, I've spent a lot of time, most of my career in Africa, and the Chinese have been very active for a long time. But what the Chinese are not providing, and if you talk to the Africans, talk frankly to African leaders, they will say, it's wonderful to have the Chinese. They built our foreign ministry building. They built another stadium. Do they share technology? No. In fact, a lot of times, China is exporting the workers down to the guy who digs the trench in the street. So, what does Africa get out of it? Yes, the government gets a nice big new stadium where they can hold, I don't know what, but at the same time, we are, trust me. And Madam, no, a woman I just met over there has written a book about China and Africa, and I'm looking forward to reading it. But it's very true. The Africans are not, they're very careful, and they know what China is giving them and what China is not giving them. And the United States is still an excellent brand name in Africa. I can tell you that from personal experience. Even more than the French, especially more than the French, the UK, China, Russia, all the traditional players. The United States is seen as an honest broker, a fair trader, and a strong supporter of democracy. And I'm proud of that. Please, yes.
Thank you very much for a very nice presentation. Charlotte Hebebrand from the International Food and Agricultural Trade Policy Council.
Excellent.
Since you asked for some suggestions of what the U.S. might consider doing to sort of improve AGOA or not make it,
absolutely,
keep it from becoming obsolete, the session previous to this lunch looked at agriculture under AGOA, and it's actually, considering that some 75% of Africans are actually involved in agriculture, it would be nice, I think, to see some increase in African exports to Africa in agriculture and food. And I commend you for holding your forum in Kansas City and creating those linkages with U.S. agribusiness. I think that's a great idea. I think in addition to that, there probably are some things on the trade front that the U.S. government can do to help. And we have come up with two specific ideas that were also discussed in the session here. One would be to take a look at what I know is a controversial topic, but are the U.S. TRQs, the tariff rate quotas. They happen to be on those commodities in which African countries
I heard you a little bit about the sugar.
Quite
in the EU
competitive.
And sugar. Absolutely.
Right? So, I think there are ways that one can address those issues, because some of the quota allocations are not actually being filled.
Right.
They date from many, many decades ago. It's a really antiquated system. In some cases, they don't even meet the original purpose, which was to help U.S. producers stave off imports, because in the meantime, the U.S. domestic support program for some of these commodities has changed. So that's one suggestion. The other suggestion, and I think this ties into the women farmers,
which is like saying farmers, right?
An interesting observation was made by Laurencia, who's here from Ghana, that it's the women farmers that tend to do the horticultural crops. It's the men that go for the cash crops.
Okay.
So horticultural products from Africa, this is, again, a product or a set of products where the Africans are quite competitive. They export quite a bit to Europe.
Yes.
In the U.S., there are some difficult standards they have to meet, and they have to do their homework and get their systems in place. But it seems to me there's a great scope here for somehow introducing in AGOA a chapter on capacity building focused specifically on SBS issues and trying to help producers meet U.S. standards. So just want to throw those out. Thank you.
Not to become too quantitative, but I do want to throw a number out that over the past 15 years, the United States has spent $3 billion on capacity building around agriculture in Africa. I would also like to add that, in fact, under President Obama, there is a Feed the Future initiative, which is very interesting, relying on the CAADP standards, investment plans. Rwanda has already received money. Ghana, I believe, has already received money, and this is coming out of the G8 summits. And President Obama has insisted and is sticking to getting $3.5 billion into African agriculture within the next 4 years, which is a big goal, but he's also enlisted the support of the rest of the G8. There's also a new World Bank trust fund that's been set up. It was set up in April that Togo is taking advantage of, getting $39 million over 5 years, primarily on infrastructure in the northern part of the country. There's some stuff going on. The Obama initiative, Dr. Rajiv Shah at USAID is a big backer of Feed the Future, and that's an encouraging thing. I think we all agree with you that, frankly, 70% of Africa is working on a farm, and there's the potential for really good economic development through that. Sir, you've been holding your hand up for a while. I apologize for not getting to you.
Good afternoon. Kennedy Cabo, President of Cabo Mabe on Time. It's a South African interest group here in Washington, D.C., and also in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Congratulations, by the way, on the marvelous handling of the World Cup this year.
I have a question and a statement, and I want to piggyback on one of the lady's statements saying we want to be a little candid, and we like your frankness in addressing some of these issues. The statement is, especially for South Africans, there is this growing sentiment among emerging black South African businesses that there are American businesses in South Africa and the American government as a whole, their position on black economic empowerment is not clear and in some cases very, very disturbing. And therefore that leads into discussions around AGOA is also influenced by this sentiment that it's been 10 years, but we are forever told that we are not doing what we are not doing right, as opposed to also the U.S. coming to the party, especially around what is the most pressing issue in South Africa, and that is black economic empowerment. So there's not excitement around revising and revisiting AGOA because of this pressing issue around black economic empowerment. And the second part of my statement is that the presence of the Chinese on the continent should not be taken lightly because, again, connected to the first statement, which is why are the standards for engagement so high, and Africans are also beginning to feel you can never make Americans happy no matter how much you try. There will always be something else that they put forward. So as we talk about AGOA, at least selfishly around South Africa, I'm saying we need to look into how we become very unambiguous and as clear as we can be around black economic empowerment because it influences other discussions and debates around where and how do we move forward.
Right.
And the presence of China also, to some Africans, is saying, to heck with the U.S., we can move with the Chinese because their standards or the bar is not that high. Yeah. Whether we agree with it or not, there's a reality and there's something I think ought to be looked at.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I'm the author of this book, China, Africa, and the Diaspora Perspectives, and we've gleaned the perspectives throughout Africa, China, many places in the world, from the top to the bottom. But I just wanted to comment that yesterday, the State Department, together with USAID and other agencies, held a very interesting talk about the role of China in Africa. So I just wanted to give some support to the fact that the U.S. government is, in fact, studying this issue. I think I can say very
Absolutely.
Very
we had
strongly.
Yes. No, I agree with you 100%. It is being discussed. I think one more question, Steve, or is one more question, please? And it better be a goodie.
I hope it is, but I'm sure it is. I think mine is more a contribution. I was thinking it's important that, much as we are discussing all these issues under AGOA, we look back and review one thing that has been coming up so much that we, as civil society, should be monitoring. I think the aspect of monitoring has failed. That's my opinion. I think we need to be more proactive as a civil society.
Of what the U.S. government is doing, or the African government, or
I think
the
in
failure
terms of
both?
I think both. The civil society needs to play a much more stronger role, and not just monitoring. They need to be more proactive. And I say so because I'll look at it from a perspective of the women's movement in Africa.
Yeah.
If you assess the way the women's movement has done and what they've done within the time when they started working together, and I belong to that movement, and if I look at AGOA, we've done almost nothing as a women's movement in Africa in addressing AGOA. And not until you put us on your table and give us a piece of a cake that we champion it and move a big piece. The next 10 years, let's champion it and move with our men. You will see results.
I know.
But for as long as you leave it in the hands of the men, you will discuss corruption, you will discuss all these issues. They will never stop coming off your tables.
Bravo, bravo.
So that's my contribution.
Bravo. I wish... I regret that you weren't the first person to ask a question, because we really could have gone at it. Thank you very much. And thank you all. It's always great to hear from you what your opinions are. And I know we've got a long way to go with AGOA, but with your help, civil society, I think we can achieve something really, really good. Thank you.
Well, what a frank and refreshing presentation that was. Thank you very much, Secretary Fitzgerald. We really appreciated that. And what a bunch of energy in this room. I hope you maintain it for this afternoon session, because we've got a lot more to go and a lot more information to be digested, along with your food. Thank you very much. We will adjourn and see you in the room next door.